When Rishi Sunak somehow convinced the Tory faithful that he should become Prime Minister, he inherited from Boris Johnson via Liz Truss the Public Order Bill and the Police Act, which included repressive and regressive regulations. Now, with Boris Johnson confined to the wheelie bin at the back of Wetherspoons and with Liz Truss, the mouthpiece for the IEA, out of the way, it was hoped that Dishy Rishi might see sense and scrap changes to this legislation. But instead, he has chosen to double down and make it worse.
What have we done on this side of the House? We've introduced new powers to curb disruptive protests. We're protecting public services against undisruptive strike action, Mr. Speaker.
Effectively, he has introduced into the Public Order Bill an amendment that would not only assist police ban any protest that they want to ban, but to also make a protest illegal before it has even happened. And in my opinion, for what it's worth, this is a watershed moment for rights and freedoms in our country, simply because it introduces the concept of thought crime. This is about freedom. It's not about the purpose of freedom. And these amendments criminalise intention. Effectively, the police have been granted powers, extra powers, in determining who may speak out and who may not. Now, for the most part, I'm pretty supportive of the police. And despite internal issues, they are being used as a political football and being forced to present themselves as being open and liberal, whilst also being authoritarian. And there's something quite incompatible about that. But I am very concerned about how those at the top will use these arbitrary powers in the future. For example, existing powers back in 2016 slapped draconian restrictions on the United Cabbies Group for calling protests against TfL turning a blind eye and licensing illegal operations here in the capital. Those protests and the UCG have since been vindicated because the illegal operation that I'm speaking of was forced to amend its model in 2018. So those who were being wronged back in the day were forced to shut up because the authorities didn't want their policies exposed. So I will never accept that additional powers are there for everybody's benefit, nor will I accept that those powers won't be abused in the future. It stands to reason that unless people in this country have powers over their own government, the people will eventually find themselves in a place of tyranny. Unless limitations are placed upon the government, and more specifically, how the government creates legislation, that government will eventually find itself in a position of absolute power, because power ultimately lies with those who deliver the punishment. We may be frustrated by the current protests, but if we let those protests pave the way to strengthening the government's arm, we cannot complain when those powers are used coercively against us in the future. Don't let the freedom we enjoy today, even the very idea of freedom as we perceive it now, become all but unthinkable to our children and the generations that follow.